Hello, I'm Claire, and I need to talk about something that I've been holding within for far too long. Listen to my narrative before passing judgment. I never imagined that I would end up in this predicament, and I still find it difficult to comprehend how things got out of control so fast. My husband forced me to do something that altered the trajectory of my life, and I've been plagued by that recollection for years. It all began several years ago. My spouse Michael and I had been wed for about a decade. We had our ups and downs like other couples, but I never anticipated this. Michael used to be a loving man, but things changed with time. He grew more aloof, domineering, and less loving. I made an effort to ignore it, convincing myself that it was simply work-related stress. But I felt something wasn't right. Michael had an odd energy when he returned home from work one evening. Although he appeared exceptionally cheerful, there was something unnerving about the way he gazed at me. He asked me to sit down as I was about to do the dishes after our customary dinner. His tone was solemn, so I obeyed, feeling that this would not be a routine talk, as my heart began to rush. "There's something I need to share with you," he said, averting his gaze from mine. I nodded and waited for him to say something else, but what he said surprised me. He informed me that he had been bored and that he felt it was time to try something new in order to liven up our relationship. I initially assumed he was referring to a romantic retreat or even some therapy to reignite the spark, but his suggestions were everything but. "I've set up a meeting with two men, and he told me straight out that they will be visiting this weekend." I looked at him, unable to make out what he was saying. His face was really serious, my stomach turned, and I experienced a rush of nausea. I wasn't sure if he was kidding or if this was some sort of horrible test. "Are you referring to two men?" I asked in a hardly audible whisper. He tried to sound informal, as though this was commonplace when he said, "They're friends of mine. Together, we will spend the night with them." My hands shook as I attempted to take in what he was saying, and I was unable to speak. I had promised to spend the rest of my life with this man, but he wasn't my spouse. As if it were insignificant, he was discussing bringing two strangers into our marriage and into our house. I felt nauseous just thinking about it, but more than that, I felt deceived. How could he possibly make such a suggestion? "Have you gone insane, Michael?" My voice trembled with a mix of incredulity and rage when I finally managed to pronounce it. "We're not like this. Why would you do that at all?" However, he interrupted me before I could finish. "This is happening, Claire," he said sharply. "You must comprehend. Something I desire. Something we require." What I was hearing was unbelievable. Even though I loved Michael, I couldn't comprehend why he was pressuring me to do something so humiliating. Something that seemed capable of destroying everything we had worked so hard to achieve. I declined, telling him I wouldn't follow through. That should be the end of it, I thought. That he would change his mind and abandon the notion. However, I was mistaken. Michael became more aloof during the course of the following few days. He hardly talked to me outside of discussing the plan. He began arriving home late, and he gave me evasive explanations when I questioned him about his whereabouts. Suffocating stillness took the place of the love that formerly pervaded our home, and our conversations were tense. I felt lost, alone, and perplexed. What had happened to our marriage? The fear had taken root in my chest by Friday. Regardless of what I stated, Michael insisted that the meeting was taking place. I thought about packing my things and heading out the door, but I decided against it. Part of me was still clinging to the man I believed I knew, hoping this was a passing phase that we could resolve, as much as I hated to acknowledge it. I wasn't prepared to end our shared life. However, the idea of carrying out his plan was too much for me to handle. Saturday night came too soon. At 8 p.m., Michael's alleged companions showed there on time. Trying not to cry, I sat on the couch with my hands gripped in my lap. They were sitting in my living room conversing with my husband as though they were old friends, and I had no idea who they were. I could feel their eyes on me, and the tension in the air was palpable. Waiting, watching. I wanted to vanish, to flee the house, and never return. Michael then put his hand on my knee and leaned over to me. "It's time, Claire," he muttered. I froze my body, refusing to move, despite my mind's cries for me to get up and go. Michael's hand was like a weight binding me to my knee. He was out of my line of sight, and I couldn't even glance at the two men seated opposite from me. The room felt like it was closing in on me, and my heart was thumping in my chest. "Please, Claire." Michael repeated, his tone now softer, almost begging. I paused because of something in his tone. It went beyond simple demand. It was desperate. I noticed a glimmer of vulnerability in his eyes for the first time in days. For him, this was more than just a way to fulfill some deranged vision. It had to do with power control and something more profound that I was unable to fully comprehend. "That didn't make it right, though. This didn't feel right. Michael, I can't do this." At last, my voice cracked as I whispered, "We're not like this." With a heavy groan, he slumped back and rubbed his irritated temples. "Do you believe I'd like this? More to himself than to me?" he muttered. "Claire, I'm doing this for us. Do you not understand that? No, you're not." I found a glimmer of strength and shot back. "For yourself, you are doing this. Michael, you've changed. This is no longer about us. It has to do with control." I briefly believed I saw guilt flicker across his face, but it vanished as soon as it appeared. Rather, he tightened his jaw and got to his feet, pacing the room like a lost man. I wanted to connect with him and bring him back to the person I remembered. However, I had no idea how. We had come a long way, and I doubted we would ever be able to find our way back. One of the males, let's call him Daniel, cleared his throat as the two of us remained silent. Despite his apparent awareness of the tension, he exuded impatience. "Look," he remarked in a forceful but composed tone. "We should probably go if this doesn't happen." For the first time, I gave him a serious look as I peered up at him. I didn't anticipate him. His manner seemed more understanding than I had anticipated, and he was composed, even respectful. These men weren't predators, despite what I had been led to believe. They were only human, and for some reason, that further complicated the problem. I had no desire to stay. This was turning into something I didn't want to be a part of. However, the burden of everything the years I spent with Michael, our past love, and the hope that things may return to normal somehow kept me seated there. I had no idea what to do. I felt imprisoned and choked by my own hesitancy. Michael then spoke in a calm but determined tone. "We're done if you go, Claire." The remarks were like a kick to the stomach. I tried to make sense of what he had just said as I stared at him in shock. I had to decide which side I would stand on when he drew a line in the sand. Tears started to form in my eyes, but I blinked them away so he wouldn't see me cry. He went on in a calm but icy tone. "I've given you everything. I've taken care of you and loved you, and all I'm asking for is this one thing." With unsteady but resolute legs, I got to my feet. I said, scarcely raising my voice above a whisper, "Michael, this isn't love. This is manipulation." I no longer cared that his eyes flared with rage. This was not something I could accomplish. This is not something I would do. I was completely expecting him to yell, grab me, and try to stop me as I turned toward the door. However, he didn't. Rather, I overheard him remark something along the lines of, "You'll repent this." Perhaps I would. Perhaps it was a mistake to go, but I knew I had to do it at that very moment. Michael or anybody else couldn't make me do something I didn't want to do. The cool evening air hit my face as I went outside, and I experienced a weird mix of sadness and relief. My thoughts were racing as my legs propelled me along the street. Where would I go? How would I respond? I felt deeply betrayed and lost, but I had no solutions. After what seemed like hours of wandering, I finally found myself in front of my best friend Laura's house. Hoping she was home, I knocked on the door. She asked no questions when she opened the door and saw my face, which was smeared with tears. She simply walked me inside and embraced me tightly. I stayed with Laura for the following 3 days while I tried to take in everything that had transpired. I felt as though a piece of me had been ripped out. Although I knew I couldn't go back, I still missed Michael. The damage was already done, and what was damaged could not be fixed. Michael made several attempts to call me and left voicemails ranging from angry to regretful. He was erratic, and I was unable to follow his changing moods. After I didn't return any of his calls, he eventually gave up. After several months, I gradually started to restore my life. I knew that our marriage could not be saved, so I filed for divorce. Although that was the most difficult choice I had ever made, it turned out to be the right one. Being coerced and pushed into circumstances that contradicted my values made it impossible for me to continue in a relationship. I still occasionally reflect on Michael and the life we may have had if circumstances had been different. However, I've realized that I'm worthy of better. Instead of dominance and manipulation, I deserve a relationship based on mutual respect, trust, and understanding.